Hey there folks, welcome to module 13, the last module of the Microsoft MD-100 course. Today's module is titled Troubleshooting Hardware and Drivers. Now in this last module of this course, we've got three main sections we'll be looking at. The first of which is troubleshooting device driver failures. Second, overview of hardware troubleshooting. And then lastly, we'll be covering the section called Troubleshooting Physical Failures. Now, like usual, before we jump into the main sections here, if you haven't done it already, please do me a favor and give the video a like. It does help boost the channel, it does boost the video. And of course, if you'd like to know when I release some other courses on this channel, remember to also subscribe. Alright folks, let's look at that first main section, troubleshooting device driver failures. Now, folks, this first section is just that. It's just a section. So this is in no way a topic in the video. It is simply a section in this video. As I'm sure you guys are well aware by now that each of these modules has multiple sections, and each section has many topics. The amount of topics, the amount of sections obviously varies depending on Microsoft. So, what do we have in this first section? I'm going to start you guys off with tools for managing your devices. The first tool that we've got on our list, which is probably the most well known here, is Device Manager. Now, if you've been following this course, you probably remember this tool. We've covered it in great depth. Not only did we explain what it is, we also showed you guys a little bit about how you can go and access it and how you can actually go and use it. So what do we use Device Manager for? We can use this bad boy to view our devices. So in other words, to see what hardware devices do we have installed on this machine. Bearing in mind that if you're going to go and install an additional hardware device on your machine, something that you already have something of, an example would probably be a hard drive, it might not necessarily make a new category in Device Manager. So if I, for example, have one hard drive currently installed on my desktop or my laptop, and I go into Device Manager, it's probably going to be listed under something like disk drives or something close to that. And if I go and install a second hard disk drive, it's not going to suddenly make a new category. No. You would have to go and expand disk drives. Let's assume that's what it's called. And under that category, you'll see now you've got two. So anytime you'll see a new category is if you install something brand spanking new that you did not previously have installed at all. A new type of hardware. So never mind viewing the kinds of devices we've got, we can see what drivers they've got installed currently. It's probably going to be the default generic driver, the #1 driver, the first driver that's installed by Windows. We can see these devices with their details. We can see their settings, and we can even view their events. Not something we normally go and do there, though. Normally, events is something you'll go and check in a place like Event Viewer. It's probably the better suited place for that, but if you really want to, you can in fact actually go and check events in Device Manager as well. Something Device Manager is quite commonly also used for is enabling and disabling devices. Based on my experience, it's probably going to be to disable a device because let's face it, most of these devices are going to be turned on by default. The only time a device is not going to work by default is if you have not installed the drivers. So it's very rare and very unlikely you're going to find yourself having to go and disable a device. The only times I really had to go and do that in my life is if I had to go and turn something off and turn it back on. Yeah, it's that simple. That famous old IT joke where we say, have you tried turning it off and on again? The most likely scenario of where you're going to find yourself doing this is probably going to be the network card, although it's not limited to the network card. So if you or one of your users are experiencing an issue with network capabilities, maybe this laptop, desktop, or whatever it might be, doesn't want to connect to a network, one of the very first things we do, which is a very quick and easy step to go and take, is to go and disable the network card and turn it back on. Now it sounds pretty silly, but believe me, that actually does resolve a lot of issues. And then what we can also do in a Device Manager is of course to go and install, update, and uninstall or even roll back device drivers. I think that part you guys would have known already. That's probably one of the very first things we learn about Device Manager. It's probably one of the first things we also do in Device Manager is to go and update drivers and install drivers. I wouldn't say everybody knows about the rollback driver feature, although that is a very good function to go and make use of if you find yourself in a sticky situation where you might have installed the wrong driver or the user might have installed the wrong driver. If you're more curious about that, feel free to go and look at the previous modules that was covered in this course where we actually discussed Device Manager and also show you how to go and use these functions. Alright, and then you can also use Device Manager to go and troubleshoot device issues, hardware device issues of course. And then lastly folks, just something you should be aware of, the Device Manager can only be used to manage devices locally on your machine. That's it. So that is unfortunately a limit, but it's still a pretty nifty tool to go and make use of. And it's a very nice, useful tool to have in your arsenal of tools. Other quick tools that I'm just going to mention here as honorable mentions, for when it comes to managing your devices. It should come as no surprise that we can, of course, use PowerShell. I mean, let's face it, we can use PowerShell for just about anything, provided in some cases you might need to go and install the module. So yes, technically, for the most part, you can go and use PowerShell to do just about anything, but there is going to be cases where you might find yourself needing to go and install some sort of module first before it's actually going to go and work. So you can think of these modules as an expansion pack, teaching your PowerShell new tricks. And then we also have something called defcon.exe for the folks that's familiar with that. All right, and then yes, I know I've just mentioned this topic to you guys, but this actually is the next topic in this module. Don't ask me why. Microsoft does weird things for weird reasons. So the next topic up is, yes, driver rollback. Now I did mention this to you guys, and I did actually even show it to you guys in the previous module. We didn't even explain it in the previous module. But let's go over it again because it's bound to be a question or two in the exam, so it's not going to harm you to go through it again. At the end of the day, the more we cover this, the better. So driver rollback, as you guys know, is a function you can go make use of to basically remove or revert your driver back to a previous version. If you're going to go and right click on a device in Device Manager, because this is where you're going to find that, you normally have to go right click on a hardware device in Device Manager, go to Properties, go to Driver tab and all that. And there you'll find this mystical tab called Rollback Driver. Most of the time, as I'm sure you guys have seen in my previous modules, this button is grayed out. In other words, it's disabled. And that is, of course, because there's only one driver currently installed or no driver installed, which means there's nothing to roll back to. So this function is going to allow you to roll back to a previous version of a driver, assuming, of course, there is one available. Most of the time, there will not be one available. But if this is something like a graphics card, because that's something we normally tend to go and update the driver for, of course, especially gamers and all that. If you've got a graphics card and you've updated the driver at least once, you now have 2 or more drivers installed. Well, technically the limit is 2. And if I go and click on the rollback driver feature, which will now be available, it's going to roll back that driver for that graphics card to one version before the one I currently have. Yes. So now we've got a little bit of a background there for the people that's starting at module 13 and basically decided to skip the other modules. So what can we say about driver rollback? It's a non-destructive operation, but might require a restart. Now, the fact that it's going to require a restart is actually becoming less and less often. In the old days, if you installed a driver or uninstalled a driver, you almost always had to go and restart the machine in question. These days, hardly ever actually. I can't remember the last time I had to go and restart a machine because of a driver being installed or uninstalled. But yes, it is a non-destructive operation. Because you don't need to go and restart the machine, you don't need to go and do this, you don't need to go and do that. You can literally just go and uninstall a driver and be on with your day. Easy peasy, right? Now, with that being said, we can say it reinstalls previous versions of a device driver, rolls it back to a previous version. All right, and then something I would like to add on to this, which I don't believe I've mentioned in the previous modules, is this rollback driver feature, guys. It does not work on printer drivers. I know, right? Weird. So, and something that you also should know of, which I'm sure you do, is it can of course be performed in safe mode. And let me tell you, this is a very useful function to go make use of in safe mode. There is going to be times in your IT career where you or the user is going to install a driver, and that driver might in fact be the cause for this machine not to work. There's been cases where I installed a totally random driver. The one time I installed even a sound driver, I kid you not, and this sound driver kept causing the machine to crash. Every time the machine starts, the machine would just crash, crash, crash. Did not want to start. Now, how the heck do I start the machine so that I can go into Device Manager and click on the rollback driver function or system restore or whatever I want to go and use? If I can't start the machine, well, I can't go and click on that button. It's a bit of a catch-22, as some might say. Now this is where safe mode comes in. And safe mode was obviously a topic that was covered in the previous module. I think it might have been covered in module 12, if I'm not mistaken. I stand to be corrected. You're welcome to correct me in my comment section down below if you guys want. I can't remember what was covered in which module. I have to go and double check it. But if you start safe mode, the machine basically starts up without most of its drivers, not all of its drivers. Starts up without most, and starts up without most of its services and that kinds of stuff. So that means this sound driver that I just installed that kept causing this machine to crash, that driver is not going to start up with the machine. Which means I can now safely go into Device Manager, and I can now safely and very easily just go and roll back that driver, remove it, or get it back to a previous version at least, restart the machine in question, and presto behold, it's going to work. Yes, folks, that easy. So safe mode, especially if you go and combine it with the right other functions, like in this case roll back, driver, is actually a very nice team. Alright, and that brings us to the end of the first section, and of course now we're moving on to the second, which is overview of hardware troubleshooting. So if any of you guys have done some sort of other technical course like, I don't know, CompTIA A+, then you would probably be familiar with some of these things we're going to be mentioning here. So this module is very much about troubleshooting hardware, software, firmware. I would say it's probably more about hardware and software. But anyone that's got a technical background, or if you've been a technician, or if you've done some other course from some other vendor like CompTIA A+ or something, you're probably going to be familiar with some of these topics already. And heck, you probably would have even covered them deeper, and you might have even have implemented them in a real world environment. All right, on to our first topic. Hardware related problems. Yeah, you see what I meant by this sounding very much like the CompTIA A+ course. So yeah, if anyone has done that course, you'll notice there's quite a lot of, things that tend to overlap. So when it comes to hardware related problems, one of the most common issues you guys are going to face is going to be physical in nature. And it makes sense. We're talking about hardware here, and hardware generally is stuff you can actually touch with your hands. Now, within the category of physical, we've got movable parts or moving parts. This can be a lot of things, but it generally comes down to things like fans. So even laptops have fans, as I'm sure you're aware. Power supplies, and you might think to yourself, well, power supply, yes. If you go look at the average power supply, or better known as PSU for short, power supply unit, they normally come with a fan to cool them down. You'll see I've got hard disk drives there. That's obviously not for solid state drives. We don't have that in mind when we wrote that there. When I have hard disk drives there, that's the old mechanical drives. Nowadays we call them mechanical, but back in the day we just used to call them hard drives because they were the only kind of hard drive you would get. So looking back at the old hard drives, which we now call mechanical, they've got a disk and a spindle and all that kind of stuff. It's movable. And if you drop it, yeah, it can fail. Never mind dropping it. Sometimes it just fell for no apparent reason. It's going to happen. It's got nothing to do with age, although that does have an influence on it. Sometimes it's got nothing to do with the age or the brand or anything. It just fails. You get that like that. It happens. All right. And then also in the category of physical issue, you also get excessive dust. This is a lot more prone to happen on a laptop. So, I mean, it doesn't mean it can't happen on a desktop PC. I've seen lots of desktop PCs where they can't cool down properly because, the fans are clogged with dust, but that doesn't happen easily on a desktop PC. The only times I've seen that happen with a desktop PC is if it's a gaming machine. It's very, very, very dusty. And gaming machines tend to get a lot hotter than the average machine. For the average workstation that you're going to be using for the purpose of work, if it's dusty, you should be okay. Laptops, not so much. Laptops, even if you go use it for normal work purposes, if it gets too dusty, those vents, it's going to overheat and it's going to shut down on you, or it's just going to slow down to the point where it's basically rendered useless for the most part. All right, and then also in the hardware related problems section, we have driver issues. Now, this is not something physical. The first one was physical, like the name suggests. This is something digital in nature. So the driver, for the people that don't know, you can think of it as the translator between the actual physical hardware and the operating system you're running on the machine. On its own, the operating system you're running, which is in this case going to be Windows 10 or 11, that operating system can't directly communicate with the hardware, being your RAM, CPU, and all that kinds of stuff. It can't. They don't understand one another. And that is where your drivers come into play. These are like middlemen that can basically communicate between the hardware and the operating system, and they basically help with them understanding one another. Now, what are the issues we could face? One of the first ones and most likely ones is version incompatibility. Yep. Then we've got a defective driver. That actually happens very unlikely. It's not something you'll see happening often. The average driver you install these days normally comes with the hardware. And if it doesn't, you can normally go to the manufacturer's website, type in the make and model number. Although these days I've seen a lot of websites actually automatically detect the device, and then they automatically know what make and model it is and all that. And generally, whether you go and install it, if the software comes with the device, or if you go to the website, either way, I don't foresee us having any issues with defective driver because it normally installs the right driver, which is a tried and tested driver, and it's a signed driver. Signed driver means it's tried and tested, and it's for the most part guaranteed to work with that specific device. So yeah, I suppose you could go to a dark alley, figuratively speaking, digitally speaking. You can go and download an aftermarket driver for something, but we don't really do that. It's not really necessary. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to have to go and do that unless you're using some sort of very, very rare, out of the ordinary hardware device. Unless you're doing that, I can't see you having to go and do that. All right, and then lastly, incorrect driver assigned. I mean, if you have the wrong driver installed, let's just face it, it's not going to work. It's like putting in the wrong parts into your car. It's just not going to work. You need the right part to make something work. And if you've got the wrong driver installed, it's kind of like me getting a translator that's supposed to translate between language 1 and language 2. And the translator I got is for language 3 and 4, not for language 1 and 2. Can you imagine the confusion that would cause? Oh dear, shucks. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic here, understanding wireless devices. And I think the reason they've got this in here is probably because, let's face it, there's so many things these days that's wireless. Pretty much everything is wireless, even our freaking mouses and keyboards, our headphones, everything is wireless. So, when it comes to troubleshooting your average everyday wireless devices that you can typically find on a Windows 10 or Windows 11 device, that would be your normal Wi-Fi. So if I'm trying to connect to a hotspot, my normal SSID in my home or my office environment, what are the Wi-Fi related issues we can experience? This can obviously be Bluetooth as well. The average laptop generally these days has Wi-Fi capability, which means you can go and connect to a hotspot, in other words, an SSID. And they also generally come out with the ability to go and connect to Bluetooth, of course. Bluetooth being very useful these days because you could have yourself a Bluetooth headphones. My kids has got those. I kept buying headphones for my kids that's got a normal aux cable. I don't know why, if they eat these cables or what, but they keep breaking the freaking cables, these kids of mine, and they're not that small. So I figured, you know what, let me just buy them wireless Bluetooth headphones. They've also got an aux cable that's detachable and you can go plug it back in. Most of the time I just plug it out because I know they're going to eat it or something. Not really. Don't call child services on me. They don't really eat that. Anyway, so with the Bluetooth capability, that solved all of those problems. So I just need to remember to charge the freaking things. Otherwise, they're all over my case, these kids. I don't know. When I was a child, I remember playing with sticks and rocks outside. But these days, kids, if their phones aren't charged, they drive you insane. So yeah, these days you can connect your laptop to headphones. You can go and connect it to Bluetooth mice. I've seen those. You can go and connect it to Bluetooth. A lot of things, quite frankly. There's a lot of things you can go and do. Wi-Fi wise, I think the limitations are virtually endless there. You also get airplane mode, which is something you guys can go and make use of. But although that's something you'll more commonly find on a phone or a tablet, I don't really see people using laptops on a computer on a plane. So airplane mode or phone or plane mode, I can't remember what I always call it. It varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. Generally, this is to go and turn off all forms of wireless frequencies on your device. So if we pretend for a moment this is a phone that you're going to be taking on a plane, there's a myth out there that supposedly these wireless frequencies can cause the plane's instruments to, I don't know, act up, and it could possibly cause something not so nice to happen. The plane can land in the ocean, I suppose, and you'll learn how to swim with the fishes. Not sure if that's true, so if anyone has any confirmation on that, or if you've got a pretty cool video on YouTube, feel free to tell me about that. Please don't drop the links to those videos in the comments. I've seen YouTube doesn't like that. I myself have no issue with that at all because it's completely unrelated to the channel. But YouTube is not gonna like it very much if you drop a link in someone else's comment feed. They might even give you a warning or something for that. So please don't do that. Instead, let us know what you searched for in the YouTube search engine, and then we can go and search for it. Just tell us, hey, I typed in blah blah blah, and it was the third one from the top, or something like that. You can even tell us what the thumbnail looks like. And yeah, by all means, please, if you know of a video on YouTube where they confirm, kind of like a Mythbusters kind of video, if you guys know what Mythbusters is, where they confirm whether this is a true myth or not, I would really like to know whether these wireless frequencies really do interfere with a plane's instruments. I don't know. It's a myth, that's all I know. So apparently the plane mode or airplane mode on your phone is supposed to turn off all these wireless frequencies, Bluetooth, your SSID, normal Wi-Fi capabilities, everything, your NFC, the whole shebang is going to be turned off. And you can still open your phone, you can still turn it on, you can browse your pictures and all that, play offline games, but for the most part, your phone is going to be useless. So if you're going to be turning off all wireless capabilities on your phone, I think it's going to be kind of useless, the machine, so you might as well just leave the phone off, in my opinion, then. The issue of airplane mode, which is probably why it is here, a lot of people, including myself, tend to forget it on. Now you might wonder, but why did I turn it on in the first place? I did not. Normally when mine's on is because I turned it on by accident. I swiped it on. I didn't notice it, and then for half a day I'm wondering why I'm not getting any messages, only to later realize that, oops, I put it in airplane mode. Plane mode, airplane mode, I can't remember what they call it, but it varies from phone to phone. Then we've got Discovery. That's more applicable to laptops and desktops, although you get similar functions on phones and tablets as well. So ever since, let me get my ducks in a row. I think it's from Windows Vista, depending on how you want to pronounce that. There's a Discovery feature that you need to go and turn on. And if you don't turn it on, you can basically imagine your machine being invisible on the network. It's going to be a home network, it can be your office network. So if I go and configure the IP address correct, my firewall's configured correctly, everything is configured correctly for my specific machine, but other machines just can't find mine on the network and just can't connect to mine on the network. One of the reasons that might happen is because Discovery has not been turned on. It's usually turned off by default. So this came out towards the end of 2008, and still till this day, it's a function that you normally have to go and turn on. So you can go to Network Discovery or Network and Sharing Center. That's normally what we had to go and do. And you normally have to go and turn a little bugger on there. Now, depending on whether you're on a domain or not, you might have to go and turn this on for multiple kinds of networks or just one kind of network. So just keep that in mind. Then, folks, we also have something called pairing. Now, what does that sound like? Sounds more like Bluetooth, doesn't it? So, if you want to go and communicate with some sort of Bluetooth device, I think that's probably the best example to use here. Let's say I want to go and connect to a Bluetooth headphones, like the kinds my kids use. You are going to have to pair with those Bluetooth headphones first. You're going to have to go and turn the device on, assuming they've been charged and all that. Turn Bluetooth on your laptop or your phone, and then you're going to have to go and search for a device. It's probably going to have some sort of weird generic name that was given by the factory. You're going to have to go and pair with it. I've seen in some cases, depending on what you're trying to pair with, the other device might ask you to confirm. So if you're going to try and pair with your car's audio system, I've seen you might get some sort of acknowledgement on the car or the phone or both of them. We just need to make sure it really is the other one. If you're going to try and pair with another device like another phone, you might also get some sort of confirmation key or something you need to acknowledge. A key that might be displayed on the one screen, you have to go type on the other side just to make extra sure you're not trying to hack or hijack someone, in a sense of Bluetooth. So that's really what pairing comes down to, is just to make sure that you are who you say you are and you're not trying to go and connect to someone else's device and all that. Although, it is pretty easy to go and do that if it's a device that's not like a phone. If it's something like a TV, well, I don't know about TV so much, but if it's something like headphones, you can go and pair with it without, getting someone's permission. So if your neighbor is very close by, let's say literally next door to your house or your unit or whatever flat you're staying in or hostel, if they're very close by and they've got a Bluetooth device, you could potentially pick that up through the walls and you can potentially go and connect to that Bluetooth device and get up to some sort of shenanigans. Yes. And that brings us to the next topic here, device proximity. Now this can mean a lot of things and it can be a lot of things. So if we're talking about Bluetooth, which was one of the main topics just here now, If you have a Bluetooth device that you would like to connect to, it needs to obviously be within range. You also need to be aware that some Bluetooth devices are going to interfere with one another because of them running on the same frequency. You're also going to have situations where Bluetooth devices might interfere with other things like your home or office Wi-Fi. The average home or office environment runs on a standard of 802.11g. Now, the 802.11g standard runs at a frequency of 2.4 gigahertz. Now, guess what frequency Bluetooth runs at, folks? The Bluetooth frequency or standard is 802.11b, where the average one for your home and office is G. And both of these frequencies runs at 2.4 gigahertz, which means they interfere with one another. So if you've got a router or an access point or something in your environment, and you've got a couple of Bluetooth devices near those devices, you might potentially find your network not working the way it's supposed to. It's either going to be completely unavailable. You're going to have it dropping and going on and dropping and going on and off, on and off. If you're on YouTube, you might find videos that are going to load the next moment, and the next moment they don't want to load at all. It's just going to be all over the place. And that could be some of the symptoms you're going to experience when it comes to Bluetooth. I've even seen this happen a lot on my own, environments. Heck, I've seen this just the other day in my own home. Those same headphones I was speaking about, they caused a little bit of issues in my house. Just had to go and switch my router to 802.11a, which is a 5 gigahertz frequency. Other times, like we just moved the headphones away. My wife also bought one of these boom boxes. I think it's not a sound bar, it's like a boom box. It looks like a giant tube. I think it's like a 13-watt one. Very, very nice little devices if you want to have a little party outside where there's no electricity or anything like that. Now, that's a Bluetooth device like you would expect. And when that device is near the house's router or access point, anything in that regard, it tends to mess around on the internet. So I had to go and change the frequency for my router, and yeah, guess what? Solved all those issues. So that brings us to the last topic here, which we kind of covered already. So sorry for mentioning this stuff in the wrong order. External interference. So if I bring that boombox of my wife near my router or my access points, it's going to give off a frequency, and if my router's running on the same frequency, it's going to cause interference. There's a lot of weird things that cause interference like that. There's even microwaves. You can go and check it. Microwaves, if they're running, if they're actually on, not just plugged in, if they're actually on, and they actually go and heat something up, it gives off a frequency of 2.4 gigahertz, and that actually tends to freak around with some instruments as well. I've actually seen this firsthand with some of my clients. Most commonly, you can experience this during lunchtime. So if you ever get a weird call from one of your customers or clients that says, my Wi-Fi at my office keeps going off at lunchtime, go and check. Maybe, just maybe, they've got a microwave oven near the access point of the router or something. This normally happens in a very small home office environment where everything is very close to one another in close proximity. In a large office environment, I mean, why would your microwave oven be near your router? That just doesn't make sense. Alright, so let's take a look at gathering hardware information. So if I would like to get information about my machine or my client or my user's machine or something in that regard, how or where can this be done? So the tools we're going to be giving you guys here, well, for the most part, are going to be tools. They're obviously going to be Microsoft tools, not third party. Microsoft wouldn't be caught dead mentioning third party tools because it's bad for business. I couldn't care less, but with this course being Microsoft and all, Microsoft's not really going to like it very much if I mention non-Microsoft tools here. So that's not actually part of the official course. And they most definitely will not ask you about non-Microsoft tools in the actual exam if anyone intends on writing this exam. So what are these tools we can go make use of? The first one is the famous old event viewer. I can't emphasize how many times we've covered that. I've lost track how many times we've covered that in this course, but it gets covered in so many senses because it's not just a logging tool where we can go view logs. It's not just a tool to go and use for auditing purposes. It's not just a troubleshooting tool. It can also be used to go and gather hardware information. And then we've got system information tool. There's actually lots of tools on your Windows operating system that can pretty much achieve the same goal. One of my favorite ways of doing things is to go to the search bar at the bottom left. That's now if you're running Windows 10. For Windows 11, it's going to obviously be in a different place. You're going to have to click on the start button in the bottom of your taskbar because it's now on the bottom in the middle. And once you've got your new search engine open on Windows 11, you can just go type the same thing effectively, which is msinfo32, one word. So it's msinfo32, one word. You type that sucker in there, and you're going to see you can view pretty much any information about your machine or your client's machine, pretty much anything you would like to desire. And then we've got Device Manager, which we did cover earlier. So Device Manager is not just a tool to list your hardware that you've got installed. It's not just to install, uninstall, or change drivers and to roll back drivers like we said earlier. It can also be used to view hardware information. I mean, I think we could have expected that much. I mean, the fact that you can see all your hardware listed there, it should come as no surprise that you'll have the ability to go and right click on one of these suckers and just go and view general information about that specific device. And like usual, PowerShell is also on this list. No surprise there either, because PowerShell can do anything. I mean, in the day, you just might need to go and install a module, like we said before. But assuming you've got the right modules and all that jazz installed and configured, you can do pretty much anything with PowerShell. And one of those things you can go and do is, of course, to go and view information about hardware. Lastly, you can go and use the Windows Memory Diagnostics tool. Now, this is unfortunately more for memory, like the name suggests, but still, nonetheless, it is a hardware information tool. It's going to tell you or give information about hardware. In this case, it's more about a specific kind of hardware, but still, it's information about hardware, hence why it's on this list. Now, speaking of list, here we've got best practices for troubleshooting hardware issues. Now, I can't help but notice how much this seems and looks like the A+ scores. For those of you that's done that, you'll hear me say that a lot in this module. So one of the first things we're going to be looking at when it comes to hardware-related issues is physical connection. So if it's actually something physically inside the laptop or the desktop machine that's giving you issues, let's say the graphics card is not working properly, it could be that maybe it's not plugged in properly. So if it's an external graphics card you need to connect to your motherboard, maybe it's gotten loose. Sometimes it shakes loose. This happens. I've had it happen with graphics cards. I've had this happen with RAM chips. Some of you guys might know these as RAM modules. I've had this happen with various kinds of PCI slots, like modems back in the day, although we don't really get those anymore. But yeah, it can happen with PCI cards. Now, this physical connection is obviously not limited to actual chips on the motherboard. This could, of course, be cable connections. So if your video is acting up on your machine or your client's machine, it could be that the video cable is not connected properly. This applies to all kinds of video cables, your normal VGA, your DVI, your HDMI, your TV cable. Ah, heck, it could be pretty much any kind of cable. Network. Is your network down or faulty? Well, go check your cable. Maybe that Ethernet cable is not plugged in properly into your laptop or desktop. You never know. Is your sound not working properly? Maybe the cable is faulty. Maybe it's loose. Maybe your dog started chewing at it. You never know. Go check the physical connection. And then we've got compatible device. Sometimes people try to force certain devices to work with one another when they simply just aren't compatible. Now, why does that sound like a relationship in real life? I don't know why, but for some reason that just popped into my head. As soon as I said compatible, I don't know. I started getting this impression in my mind of couples that's just not compatible with one another. Nothing wrong with the one or the other. It's just some people are just not meant to be together, and some devices are exactly like that. So they just aren't meant to be together. They were not designed that way, which means they're not compatible with one another. This could be something as random as a RAM chip once again. So if you go look at normal RAM chips like your DDR2, your DDR3, a DDR2 chip can normally only go into a DDR2 slot. A DDR3 chip can only go into DDR3 slot. And even if you have a DDR3 chip and you're going to try and slide that little bugger into a DDR3 slot, you also need to go and look at other characteristics like, is it fast enough? So if you've got a DDR3 chip and this chip is too slow for that slot or too fast for that slot, that could also make it not work. So that could be examples of compatible devices, compatible hardware. Another trusty tool to go make use of, and we did cover this already in this course, not necessarily in this module, is Event Viewer. Now we did mention that earlier in this module, and we definitely mentioned that earlier in this course. Event Viewer is a great built-in tool on both the client side as well as the server side when it comes to checking logs. So whenever a hardware fails or a software fails, go check your logs. All of these things, create a log, You can go view the error and you can go and basically use that to find out what the heck is going on here. It's not going to solve your problem, but it will point you in the right direction. Then we've got a recent driver change. Now, normally if you just installed a new driver, uninstalled an old driver, or changed the driver and your machine starts acting up, you're probably going to know, okay, you know what? It was probably that driver I just changed that caused this shenanigans. But what if you are not the person that changed that driver? So this is going to come down to those normal IT questions where we're going to go and ask the user, sir, ma'am, what have you changed recently in the last 24 hours? So you're going to go and ask them questions like, did you install something, uninstall something, did you change some sort of setting? And then maybe, just maybe, and this is going to happen more often than you think, this user might say something along the lines of, I've recently changed my driver for blah, blah, blah. And if that's the case, you should go and check it out. There is a very good chance that that driver could be the culprit here. And as soon as you go and change it back or uninstall it for that matter, it could resolve all the current issues that you or this client is experiencing. Lastly on this list, this is probably not the full list, but this is the list I've been given by Microsoft. Update your device firmware and BIOS. Now this, I think they've got laptops and desktops in mind here, but this is actually not just applicable to your normal laptops and desktops. This is obviously applicable to tablets, phones, routers, access points, printers, scanners, firewalls, you name it. Pretty much anything you can go and connect to a network that's got some sort of operating system on it, anything that's got firmware and BIOS, those little buggers need to be updated from time to time. Sometimes the issue is because you went and updated it. The update is sometimes the root of the problem. Other times it's because you did not go and update. I've had that. Usually it's because you did not update. So sometimes there was some sort of new change that took place. And if this machine is now, let's say, outdated, it's not exactly very compatible with the other ones that is now current and up to date. Same with your normal Windows 10 updates and Windows 11 updates. So sometimes your machine ceases to work because you got a new update, because let's face it, sometimes these updates are buggy and glitchy. Microsoft probably wouldn't be caught dead saying that, but I'll tell you, these bugs sometimes do come from your updates you get from Windows 10 and Windows 11. They are sometimes the root of the problem. And very shortly after that, you'll see Microsoft releasing another update to go and remedy the previous one where they made a boo-boo. I mean, at the end of the day, they are made by humans, and we make mistakes as humans. So we can't exactly blame them for that, because, I mean, if I was them, I probably would have done the same thing. I would make mistakes too. So yeah, it could be because you didn't update with firmware, BIOS updates. It could be anything in that regard. All right, guys, let's move on to the third main section, the last section in this course, which is troubleshooting physical failures. Alright folks, so within this last module of this course, let's start things off with replacing devices. Now a lot of people think it's just as easy as simply going in, taking the failed device out, putting a new one in, and there you go, you're on with your day. It's not always that simple, especially if you look at medium to large size organizations. I mean, sure, if it's your own personal computer, you can literally just go take the part out that's failed, put in a new one if you have one available, and you can be on with your day. But if you go look at a company, especially medium to large size companies, it's not always that simple. So we need to go look at factors like estimated recovery time. So if I'm going to go and replace a part, let's assume it's a part that needs to be replaced here, what is the estimated recovery time? Because this business could be doing business during this time. So what I'm saying here is this could basically be happening in business hours. And if this is within business hours, official working hours in other words, you can't just go and willy-nilly replace parts, because that could actually make the company lose money, especially if you need to go and turn certain things off. You might find something has failed, but the company's not necessarily losing money yet per se, or the amount of time and money they're currently losing is nothing compared to how much they will be losing if you go and turn a certain system off to go and, I don't know, replace a part or something. So you need to go look at estimated recovery time. That's one of the factors you need to go and look at. Then we've got data security issues. So if I am going to, let's say, replace something as simple as a hard drive, I think that's probably going to be the best example here. It's not always as simple as just taking an old hard drive out, putting a new one in, and there you go. No. What are you going to be doing with that old failed hard drive? Now, let me give you guys a real life scenario. Quite a lot when I had to go to clients of mine, this was quite often the government. If I had to go and take out an old failed hard drive and put in a new one, they don't normally lose data because they normally have backups and replication, all that. And as soon as you put in the new hard drive, it's going to start replicating, and there's little to no downtime at all. I actually want to say no, because there's normally a RAID array and it starts replicating and cloning itself again. The issue here with that point two, which is data security, is what am I going to do with that old hard drive? You might think to yourself, okay, well, it's a failed hard drive. What is the big deal? Yes, it's a failed hard drive, but did you know you can go and recover data from a drive? So if someone has just deleted data or formatted a drive, the data is not gone. You simply just remove the reference. Now you might argue and say, okay, but this drive has physically been damaged. That doesn't matter. So if anyone is willing to throw enough time and money at it, you can go and fix that drive. So the only way to properly dispose of the data on that drive to make sure it's 100% not recoverable is to go and do something called incinerating it, or you can go and shred the drive. If you're really freaky, you can go and take an industrial drill and you can go and drill a couple of holes through it. That's the only real way you can go and ensure the data on that drive is non-recoverable. Some people might tell you that you can go and deguzz the drive. I highly don't recommend you go and do that because sometimes a couple of files might still be recoverable, and for all we know, those files that's recoverable have very sensitive information. So the best way is, I would say, go and shred the drive, go incinerate the drive, go and drill a couple of holes with the drive. If need be, go and take a pew pew and go and make a couple of pew pews through the drive. Whatever you want to go and do in that regard. All right, and then we've got escalation procedures. Can't tell you how many times this was a real thorn on my side when I came to larger organizations. Sometimes you need to go and do something very simple. This could once again be changing a hard drive. But before you can go ahead and actually do that, there's a lot of paperwork that you need to go and complete. You need to get the A-OK, the green light, so to speak, from a lot of people upstairs, at least at that specific company, to go get the green light. And normally before you can go and do that, you need to go and fill in all kinds of change documents and all that, saying what you're about to change, why you're about to change it, how you're going to be doing it, who's going to be doing it, what's going to happen with the old file parts. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen here. And sometimes you know how to go and do something. You can go and do it. This could be something like a hard drive once again, but you're not allowed to go and do that because you haven't been hired to go and do that. It could be that you, your company, your client has got an SLA agreement with another external company. That used to be me. So quite often I would get to a client, those technicians in that server room know how to go and change something, but they're not allowed to. I would be the guy that's going to have to come in and do it because I'm the authorized person, and their company's got an SLA agreement with my company. Same with your computer. Maybe you know something about something, with regards to computers, and you probably do if you're doing this course, but you're not allowed to go and do it because there's some sort of SLA agreement or, something in that regard. Speaking of which, here we've got warranties. What if that machine of yours has got a warranty? Now, you might know exactly what you're doing, but because it's under warranty, you're probably going to end up breaking some sort of seal, or some sort of warranty is going to be void if you're going to go and tamper the machine. So, even though you know what you're doing, it's best to go and take it back to where this warranty is from and have those folks repair the machine for you. This has happened to me quite a couple of times in my life where I know exactly what I'm doing, but the machine in question is under some sort of warranty. This even happens with my car. I can go and fix my car myself, but if the car is still relatively new, it probably has some sort of warranty on it. And now if I'm going to go and tamper the car, the warranty is void. And to, avoid that from happening, I'm going to end up taking it in to other people to go and repair. And that's very frustrating when I know exactly what is wrong and I know I can go and repair it myself. So that's a very frustrating feeling. But unfortunately, to keep these warranties, we sometimes have to go through those frustrations. And then lastly, something I've just mentioned, guys, SLAs, service level agreements. So quite often you'll find that you or your company will have some sort of service level agreement. This is basically a contract if you have to summarize it. So maybe when something is wrong with your machine, instead of you fixing it, even though you know what you're doing, there's some sort of contract or agreement with another company or another entity, and he or she or they will come and take that machine of yours and repair it for you because that's part of the agreement. So this is something you guys can expect to see more often in a bigger company. I don't really see this happening in personal capacities. I don't see this happening for small companies. Although I have those, but they're very rare. This is normally for your average medium to large size company who probably have some sort of SLA agreement of an entity, like the companies I used to work for. I would normally be that person that'll come to you and your company and come and fix what needs fixing, whether it be a machine, a server, or whatever. Alright, and guys, let's take a little bit of a look at vulnerable hardware devices. So we're coming at this from a Windows 10, Windows 11 perspective, which means this is probably going to be more than likely for your laptops and desktops. Not so much for servers, although, some of the stuff does overlap with servers. So what is the vulnerable actual hardware in a laptop and a desktop? This is the actual physical components you can touch. So the first one up is probably the most obvious: drives. Hard disk drives. Now, solid state drives themselves are not as vulnerable because they have no movable parts. So when we say drives, this is mostly for the old mechanical drives that's got movable parts. If you were to go and drop those drives, you're going to break them. If you were to bring some sort of magnet near those drives, you're going to go and corrupt them. There's a lot of things. The point here is those drives are very sensitive. Next up, we've got PSUs, which is short for power supply units. So if you go look at the average computer, I think it's probably going to be a lot easier for you guys to see this in a desktop PC. So if you go open the box of a desktop PC, you would see normally a smaller box inside of your computer's box. One that's got a bunch of cables coming out of it that plugs into various components like the motherboard, your hard drives, and so on and so forth. So that would be your power supply unit. And if you go check, you'll find that the power cord that plugs into your machine plugs into that box on the outside of your box. And on the inside of your computer box, there's a bunch of cables coming out that connects to the various hardware components, of course. So that power supply unit is relatively sensitive. It's got a lot of capacitors and all kinds of things in there. So they tend to, pop from time to time. So rather have the power supply pop than breaking everything in the machine. So if you're living in an area where the power is not clean, in other words, it goes up and down in voltage, the power dips, comes back on, all kinds of shenanigans like that. One of the first things that's going to fail is going to be your PSU. And if you've got a gaming machine, those things don't come cheap. But still, I would rather prefer the PSU going than the whole computer itself, because that's going to cost me a lot more money, of course. Something else that's quite vulnerable is fans. Now, when they say fans, they don't really specify which ones, so I'm going to tell you guys from an experience perspective. The case fans themselves, I wouldn't worry about those. They just get dusty from time to time, and if you leave them long enough over the years, if they run enough hours, they'll start making some sort of noise. They should generally still work, just dirty, and they've got a lot of wear and tear on them. So those ones I'm not too concerned about. The fans you need to worry about is the ones you'll find on your actual components. So I would say keep an eye on the fans that's on your graphics card. If you have an external graphics card, go keep an eye on the fan on your CPU. That's also one you need to be very careful of. That one should definitely work. If that fan is not working, your CPU is not going to cool down properly, and you're going to find all kinds of problems. For example, the machine could potentially just overheat. And once that happens, the average machine these days will just shut down randomly on you repeatedly until it cools down. Bit of a frustration. Other sensitive equipment is CPU and GPU. So CPU is short for Central Processing Unit. That's the main brains of your computer, so to speak, on the motherboard, the little chip you slide into the board. GPU is short for Graphics or Graphical Processing Unit. So that's your graphics card, guys. So those chips are very, very sensitive. Then we've got memory. Some of you guys might know this is a memory module. Some of you guys might know this is a memory chip. Some folks might know it as RAM or a RAM chip, RAM module. It's got so freaking many names, it's not even funny. So those memory chips you slide into your board, those are quite sensitive. Not as sensitive as they were about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you were to just touch those ones without, discharging yourself statically, for the folks that know, you would blow that chip and you would probably blow a bunch of other components as well. These days, you know what? You should probably be fine. But you should still take precautions when handling these chips. Don't go and just willy-nilly put them in certain containers or certain baggies or whatever, because they could very easily blow, because they are still sensitive to a certain degree. Lastly, folks, on this list of vulnerable hardware, we've got battery. Now, this is more applicable to the laptops. Why would your desktop have a battery? The only battery you'd find on a desktop is the CMOS battery on the motherboard. Not something you need to worry about. That doesn't really cause any issues besides the clock falling behind after about 10 years or so. Now, with laptops, those little buggers, they've got batteries. And if those things tend to overcharge, undercharge, yeah, they can cause a whole bunch of issues. Now, it's seen these days you would find the batteries don't give as many issues as they used to, but if you start experiencing issues like your battery swelling, that's a bad sign. You should probably go and remove that battery and have it replaced. So batteries can cause a lot of shenanigans. Alright guys, and then let's look at the very last section of the very last main section. Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? So the last section within the main section here is guidelines for replacing hardware. So before we go ahead and just willy-nilly replace hardware, you should probably go and identify the root cause. So if I have, for example, a power supply that has just failed on my computer or my user's computer or my client's computer, you should probably go and figure out why did it blow in the first place. So if you know this power supply is very old, or the customer tells you this machine is very old, it's a 10 years old computer, it could really just be a matter of it's an old power supply and it was just its time. But if this is a relatively new power supply or a new computer for that matter, and the customer tells you, no, this thing is not even a year old and it's failed, yeah, that's a bad sign. So then you would probably have to go and ask the customer all kinds of other questions. Ask them, do they have any issues with power? Does the power go up in voltage? Does it go down in voltage? Does the power dip? Anything weird like that could cause a power supply to blow. Do they have anything that they've changed physically in the computer itself? Did they add hardware, remove hardware, change hardware? And depending on what the customer answers, that will allow you to go determine what could be the root cause. Otherwise, you can end up replacing this part, which in this case is a power supply. It's obviously not limited to a power supply. And you're going to find you're going to get the same problem again very, very shortly afterwards. All right, and then we've got warranty concerns. So sometimes you cannot just go and willy-nilly replace a part because there might be warranty. We spoke about it earlier. So even though I know exactly what I'm doing, if something on my laptop, for example, breaks, you'll find it's normally got a seal on it, a little sticker in some cases. Even the computer desktop boxes have that. So I might know what is broken inside the desktop PC or the laptop, and I'm willing to go and fix it. I want to go and fix it. It's going to go very quick, very easy peasy. But as soon as I break that seal, my warranty is void now. So now you're going to have to go through the inconvenient procedure of taking the machine back where you got it from, so that the warranty is still intact, so that they can do it for you. And sometimes you'll find you may or may not have additional charges involved. So you're going to have to go and weigh the scales, if there is, of course, additional charges involved, and go and compare, whether the warranty is worth it or not. Then we've got something like static electricity. We did touch on that briefly when we spoke about the RAM chips just a moment ago. So they say the human body's got enough static electricity in it to blow circuitry. So when we say circuitry, we're talking about things like your motherboard, your CPU chip, your motherboard and stuff like that. So if you go back 10 years in time, that really was the case. If you just went and touched your motherboard, RAM chip or something like that, you would quite often blow those components. Yes, scary thought, right? Luckily for us, most motherboards and other circuitry these days are not as sensitive as they were back then. So I wouldn't personally worry about this too much, and that's definitely not going to be a question in the exam, guys. So if something is very important for the exam, we'll normally point it out. So static electricity in this specific exam is not something you need to worry about. It is a question in some exams, just not this one. That's the kind of question you guys can expect if anyone's going to go and write the CompTIA A+ exam. Yes, definitely a question in that exam. But that's completely unrelated to what we're discussing here right now. So what can we do to avoid that? So generally in IT, the proper way of doing this would be to go and get yourself an anti-static wrist strap. So these anti-static wrist straps, you can go and strap them onto your wrist. You can actually go and strap them onto your ankle. It's got like a little cable. It's got a little alligator clip. And this little alligator clip you can go and clip onto a rubber mat or somewhere or something metal. And that allows you to move freely around the proximity of that laptop or desktop. You can freely go and touch the electrical components. Well, not the actual electrical components. Let's just say the circuitry. And you don't have to worry about, blowing any components. Now, realistically, in real life, I can tell you more than 90% of the time, you're not going to have that. And the companies would normally not give you that. So what the heck do you do in those situations? You know what I do and what most people do is you just touch the inside of the frame. So if this is like a desktop PC, you touch the frame of the desktop PC. Don't touch the outside. The outside is quite often made of other materials, which is not going to really work. You need to touch the inside. So once you've opened the box, that should still be fine. You don't have to worry about, discharging yourself while opening the box. So open the box, take off the panel, and before you touch the motherboard or any of the other components, you touch the frame on the inside of the case. Now you've just discharged and you can go and safely touch the other components like the motherboard, the RAM, and all that kinds of stuff. Now, if you happen to walk away from that box, let's say you forgot a screwdriver somewhere on the other side of the room, and you come back to the box, you need to go and re-discharge yourself again. By just taking a couple of steps, you've just built up enough static electricity to go basically blow those components again. I know, it's scary, right? Now, this sounds like a lot of work, but trust me, you are going to get used to that very, very quickly. And it's going to eventually get to a point where it's going to become muscle memory. And I really encourage you guys to get into this habit. Lastly, folks, the last topic for the last section in the last main section in the last module, I just felt like I have to say that, is user interruption. So if you're about to go and replace some sort of hardware, you need to go and take into account, will you be interrupting or disturbing the user more than what they currently are? Now, if the machine is currently completely unusable, because of whatever hardware has failed, then I can't really see you interrupting the user more than what they are currently already interrupted for. But if the machine is still currently working, let's say it's a RAM chip that's not being picked up. So the guy has got 2 RAM chips in there. Maybe it's a 4 gig and a 4 gig. So he's got 8 gigs in total. One of these RAM chips is not that nice. It's not really working. It's not being picked up. His Windows is only picking up one of the 2 RAM chips. It's still working though. So in this situation, we can argue and say, okay, maybe this specific machine is still working, but the user only has 4 gigs now instead of 8 gigs. It's not picking up the second chip. But it's not causing the machine to crash yet. So if I'm going to go replace that now, there is a chance that the user could not be able to use the machine for a couple of minutes. So that's going to cause user interruption. Luckily, that should be very, very quick. So you're going to have to go and weigh the scales. Do you want to interrupt the user or not? In most cases, the user is not going to mind, for you to turn the machine off for just a couple of minutes. It's literally going to take a minute or two just to turn the machine off. They save the documents, it's open. You take out the failed chip, you put in the new chip, you start the machine, and you're back on your way. So the average user, I don't think is going to mind, but you should go and check. In some cases, it is going to interrupt the user a lot. If that's going to be the case, you should probably get the permission of the user or their manager first before interrupting user. Don't just go and interrupt the user and only afterwards say, oh, oops, sorry, I didn't know it was going to take this long. That's very unprofessional, guys. Alright folks, so that was officially the last topic in the last main section of the last module in this course. So I hope you guys have learned something today in this last module. I hope you guys have learned a lot in the course in general. Now, if anyone's going to go and write this exam because you're hoping to go and earn the certificate, please be aware there's 2 courses, there's 2 exams you need to write to earn 1 certificate. So the courses is the MD-100, which was this one. And you get the MD-101, which is a lot more cloud focused. That's more about managing all these computers and devices in bulk. So you can expect a lot of things about Intune and tools like that in that course if anyone's going to go and do that course. So if you guys would like me to do that course, please let me know in the comment section down below. If there's enough interest, then I'll go and do that one as well. Like I said, the wife says this keeps me out of trouble to go and make these courses. So yes, there's 2 courses, 2 exams. The exams has got the exact same codes as the courses. There's no rule that says you have to do the courses before you can go write the exam. So if you happen to know everything that's in the courses, I would say go write the exams. There's also no rule that says you've got to write these exams in a specific order. So if you'd like to write the MD-101 first and then do the 100, by all means, go and do that. I am going to tell you though that the MD-100 is a lot easier compared to the 101. So my suggestion would be to start at the 100, start nice and easy and like a slow. And once you've done that, then you move over to the MD-101, which is basically a follow-up. But if you really feel like you want to do the 101 first, by all means, go and do that. If you happen to write one of these 2 exams, and let's say, for argument's sake, you do end up failing it, that's fine. Eventually, one day, when you eventually pass both of these exams, you'll still earn the certificate. So whichever exam you write and pass first, whenever that might be, that exam will stay on the system as credits until you eventually go and write the next exam, and then you'll earn the certificate. You just need to make sure you write these exams before Microsoft retires these exams. At this point in time, Microsoft has mentioned nothing and said nothing about these exams being retired, but you can still go and double check it. So depending on when you watch this video, it might be, on the date that I uploaded it. It could be that maybe you're watching this module a couple of years after I've uploaded it to YouTube. Depending on when you're watching this, if you're concerned about when these exams might be retired, I would advise you to go to Microsoft's official website. You can find out by doing a quick Google search. Go to Google, type in MD-100. You're going to find normally one of those first results there is going to take you to the official Microsoft website where you can go and check what skills are being measured in the exam and in the course. They normally allow you to book the official exam online if need be at an authorized testing center near you. You can go write this exam in pretty much almost any country these days. It's an international certificate, by the way, for the people that don't know. And on that same page, you can also go and see when the exam was retired or will be retired. So if they're about to retire it in, let's say, 2 months from now, they will mention it there. It's normally highlighted in red letters in most cases, although that's subject to change. Microsoft likes changing stuff. But still, I encourage you guys to double check it. So if you see that currently both of these exams are still available, but at the same time you see that it's only going to be for 1 month, it might not necessarily be advisable to go and write, because why go and write past the first one only to not have enough time to go and write the second one, and then you never actually earn the certificate? That's a waste of your time, it's a waste of your money, and at that point in time you might be better off to go and write whatever is the newest and the latest. I don't foresee these exams being retired anytime soon, because at the date of this making of this video, Windows 11 has just been released a couple of months ago, and I don't foresee Microsoft changing that anytime soon. So I suspect the MD-100 and 101 is probably going to be at least for 3 years from the date of this making of this video. Could be longer, could be shorter, but I suspect it's going to be at least valid for 3 years from 2022. Alright folks, once again, thank you very much for your support on this channel, on this series, and if you've enjoyed it, remember to give the video a like. If you'd like to know when I release the MD-101, if I happen to make that, or if you would like to know when I release other courses, remember to subscribe, obviously. Lastly, special thank you to the sponsors of this specific video. So the people that were sponsors during the time of the making for this video, there you guys can see them. There's the Patreon sponsors at the time of the making of this video, PayPal sponsors, and then also thank you to those guys that's clicked on the thanks button below the videos. I also get those. I can see who's done that. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that. Alright guys, thank you very much. I will see you on the next course.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me.